Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. They targeted our healers, so we unleashed hell's wrath. They came under a white flag bearing promises of peace. The alien delegation, with their elongated limbs and glassy reflective eyes, bowed low before the United Terran forces. They swore their intentions were noble, their purpose diplomatic. Humanity, ever the hopeful species, welcomed them with open arms. We had fought too many wars across the stars. Every alliance mattered. The Galactic Council had already labeled us as unpredictable, dangerous, and too violent for true cooperation. So when the aliens extended their hands in truce, Earth's leaders saw an opportunity to prove we were more than the Council's accusations. Treaties were signed, trade routes were established. Humanity's best and brightest scientists, doctors, and engineers were sent to aid in rebuilding alien worlds ravaged by war. We gave them medicine, technology, and knowledge that had taken us centuries to develop. We sent our medics into their war zones, trusting that their honor was as sacred as their words, and then they slaughtered them. The first reports were confusing. The transmissions from the forward medical station stopped suddenly. At first, Earth Command assumed it was a simple technical issue, some interference on the alien worlds. Then the distress calls came in, broken, desperate voices screaming over static. What little footage we recovered showed scenes we could barely comprehend. Human medics, unarmed and wearing the Red Cross of neutrality, gunned down in cold blood. Hospitals burned, their occupants, both human and alien, reduced to smoldering remains. The ones who weren't killed outright were taken as prisoners. But what happened to them after, we didn't know. We only had whispers. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't even war. It was a massacre. The aliens broadcasted their justification across the known galaxy. Humanity was growing too strong. Their influence needed to be curbed. They were a threat to the balance of power. Earth fell silent, not out of fear, but something far, far worse. For all our civilization, our diplomacy, our progress, there was one truth the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity never forgives. They had attacked our medics, our healers, our protectors, and so Earth made its decision. We would not send diplomats. We would not send politicians. We would not even send our military. We sent the ones even we feared, the war criminals, the ghosts of past wars, the men and women locked away because their brutality had been too much even for us, soldiers, commanders, and tacticians who had fought Earth's darkest battles and left scars too deep to heal. They weren't coming to win a war. They were coming to end one. The response was swift, silent, and absolute. There was no grand announcement, no official declaration of war. Earth didn't need one. The moment the first human medics were slaughtered, the decision had already been made. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in prisons built for those too dangerous to be let free, the call went out. Some were warlords from conflicts long erased from history books. Others were black ops specialists, their names purged from every database. A few had led rebellions, not against humanity, but against its restraint. They were the ones who had crossed the line, the ones who had done things so unspeakable that even Earth's most hardened generals had refused to use them. Until now. When the orders came, the prisoners didn't resist. They didn't need convincing. There was no bargaining, no questions. They had been waiting for this moment. The first teams arrived in orbit above the alien worlds in complete radio silence. No threats, no warnings, no negotiations. The aliens didn't even realize they had visitors until their first outposts fell. There were no massive fleets or planetary bombardments. That was too clean, too easy. These weren't soldiers fighting for territory. These were human monsters unleashed upon those who had mistaken our mercy for weakness. The first city to fall never had the chance to send an alert. It started with whispers, shadows moving through the streets, officers disappearing, power failing across entire districts without explanation. The aliens were used to wars fought with massive armies and grand strategies. They expected formations, battlefields, and an enemy they could see. What they got instead was terror. Their leaders were found in their own chambers, throats slit before they could call for help. Supply routes were severed, but not by explosions, by bodies impaled and left as grotesque warnings. Weapon systems refused to fire, sabotage days before an attack even came. Their elite forces deployed in response to the growing panic, but they too vanished, one by one. Some were found later, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. Most were never found at all. Entire command centers were taken in the dead of night, their occupants slaughtered so efficiently that the aliens could only assume their own kind had betrayed them. Fear spread faster than any military response. Paranoia turned them against each other, and that was just the beginning. On another world, one of their generals, a being responsible for orchestrating the massacre of human medics, was captured. Not killed, captured. He was found 3 days later, sent back to his people in pieces. Not all at once. The first package contained his hands, the second, his eyes, the third, his tongue. The message was clear. You did not wage war. You committed murder. And now humanity has come to teach you the difference. The Galactic Council pleaded for restraint. They called for peace for a reason. Earth didn't even acknowledge them. This wasn't war anymore. This was punishment, and we were just getting started. The aliens tried to fight back. They deployed their fleets, sent their finest soldiers, reinforced their cities with the most advanced defenses their technology could provide. It didn't matter. Humanity wasn't attacking them with fleets or armies. We weren't meeting them on open battlefields or engaging in honorable duels. There was no strategy they could counter, no front line they could push against, because there was no front line. Their generals would issue orders to defend a stronghold, only to find their command centers burning before the orders even reached their troops. Their soldiers would stand guard, weapons ready, but the attacks never came where they expected. Instead, they found their food poisoned, their air supply contaminated, their water laced with chemicals that made them claw their own eyes out in agony. The war criminals weren't just killing them, they were dismantling them. It was psychological, surgical, efficient. Entire cities fell without a single human being seen. One by one, the aliens turned on each other, accusing their own commanders of betrayal. The paranoia grew so thick that executions became common, high-ranking officials purging their own ranks, convinced that only sabotage could explain their failures. And yet it wasn't sabotage. It was us. The aliens had ruled over lesser species for centuries. They had dominated the weak, crushed resistance, and enforced their will with overwhelming force. They thought they understood cruelty. They had no idea what true terror looked like until they faced the ones Earth had locked away. One by one, their leaders fell. Some were assassinated. Others were dragged from their fortresses in the dead of night. A few were left alive, shattered, broken, their minds turned to nothing but raw, primal fear. They would never lead again. And then came the final blow. The prisoners had done their job. The alien worlds were in chaos, their armies reduced to terrified fragments of what they once were. But humanity wasn't done. The fleets arrived next, not to conquer, not to negotiate, but to make sure they remembered. One by one, the planets that had ordered the execution of our medics burned. Cities were reduced to rubble, their grand monuments erased from existence. The aliens who had begged for our aid, who had betrayed our kindness, now screamed for mercy. But mercy had died the day they slaughtered our healers. We left them broken, not extinct, but ruined. Their empire collapsed into warring factions, their people too afraid to speak our name. They would never rise again. And as the last human warship departed their shattered homeworld, a single message was broadcast across the stars to every species watching. Every civilization that had once doubted what humanity was capable of, never again. The galaxy fell silent in the wake of humanity's vengeance. No species dared to speak our name. The aliens had believed us to be dangerous before, but now they saw the truth. We were not just another civilization expanding into the stars. We were something else entirely, something that did not forgive, did not forget, and did not tolerate betrayal. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Their members panicked, their voices hushed. They debated behind closed doors, trying to decide what to do. Some called for sanctions, for diplomatic isolation. Others whispered of preemptive strikes, of containing humanity before we became a true threat. But no one dared to act because they had seen what we had done to the ones who had crossed us. And deep down, they all knew. If they moved against Earth, we would do it again. On the alien worlds we had broken, the survivors struggled to rebuild. They tried to rewrite history, to paint themselves as victims. But the truth was carved into the ruins of their cities, written in the ashes of their fallen empires. And on Earth, we went back to our lives. The war criminals who had been unleashed were never mentioned in official records. Their names remained forgotten, their existence denied. Those who had survived returned to the places humanity had once locked them away, not as prisoners but as reminders. The galaxy thought we had unleashed monsters. They were wrong. The real monsters had been watching from the beginning. They had sat in their offices, in their war rooms, in their high towers, and made the decision that changed everything. They had known exactly what they were doing because humanity had never forgotten its own history. We had seen what happened when good people did nothing. We had learned the lessons of weakness, of trust betrayed, of peace mistaken for submission. We had once promised ourselves that we would be better, and we were, until the day they attacked our medics. That was the day we reminded the galaxy of the one truth they had all chosen to ignore. Humanity is kind until it isn't. The years that followed were eerily quiet. Humanity did not expand its borders. We did not launch new wars or claim new territories. Our fleets patrolled only our own systems. Our soldiers remained stationed on our own worlds. And yet the galaxy remained afraid. It wasn't what we did that terrified them. It was what we didn't do. Empires rose and fell. Conflicts erupted between species. Rebellions sparked across distant worlds. But Earth never intervened. We did not take sides. We did not offer aid. We simply watched. For the first time in recorded history, the balance of power had shifted not because of war, not because of conquest, but because of fear. The races that had once dismissed us as primitive brutes now treated us with reverence and caution. The Galactic Council avoided our anger at all costs. Trade agreements became lopsided in our favor. Diplomatic disputes always ended with humanity getting what it wanted. And yet we asked for nothing. That was what unsettled them the most. The galaxy had seen conquerors before. They had seen tyrants and warmongers, species that burned across the stars taking whatever they could. But we weren't like that. We didn't demand tribute or enslave weaker races. We just existed, and that was enough. The broken species that had betrayed us were left to their suffering. No reparations, no treaties, no second chances. They were ignored, left to rot in the ruins of their once great civilizations. A new generation of their kind grew up under the weight of what had happened to them. Humanity was not a people. We were a force, a storm that had swept through their worlds and left them shattered. And when their children asked why their cities lay in ruins, why their elders spoke in hushed tones whenever Earth was mentioned, why their history books skipped over the darkest years of their existence, the only answer they ever received was this: because we made the mistake of thinking humanity was like us. They would never make that mistake again, and neither would anyone else. Despite the silence, despite the fear that settled across the stars, whispers began to spread. There were those who questioned the legends surrounding humanity. The younger races, ones who had never seen the wrath of Earth firsthand, began to doubt the stories. They were born into a galaxy that had already been reshaped by humanity's vengeance, but they had never witnessed it themselves. How dangerous can they really be? They asked in secret meetings, in encrypted transmissions passed between rebellious factions. Some began to argue that humanity had been exaggerated, that the destruction of an empire was the result of internal weakness, not Earth's retaliation. And then there were the truly foolish ones, the leaders of new coalitions, the warlords of rising factions. They saw Earth's lack of expansion as a sign of hesitation or weakness. They wanted to test us. The first was a minor warlord from the fringes of space, his fleet composed of stolen ships and desperate mercenaries. He raided a Terran outpost. It was a small station, nothing of strategic importance. He wanted to provoke a response, to see if the myths were real. Earth's response was minimal at first. A single ship arrived in his sector. Just one. No fleet, no armies. The warlord mocked it. He broadcasted messages of defiance, demanding Earth send its so-called monsters if we truly wished to make an example of him. Then the transmission stopped. Days passed, and his forces waited for word from their leader. None came, so they sent scouts to investigate. What they found shattered them. His flagship was still there, untouched. No battle damage. No sign of struggle. The only thing that had changed was the crew. They were all dead, every single one. Not from battle, not from explosions or gunfire. They had been executed, one by one, with surgical precision. No alarms had been triggered. No distress signals had been sent. The warlord himself was found in his own command chair, eyes wide in terror, a message carved into his forehead with inhuman patience. Never again. His faction collapsed overnight. His followers disbanded, scattering across the stars, whispering warnings to anyone who would listen. The galaxy had forgotten. Humanity had simply reminded them. And so the silence continued. Earth never spoke of what happened. We never took credit, but we didn't need to. The message had been sent, and the lesson had been learned again. The lesson should have been enough. The galaxy should have remembered. But arrogance is a stubborn disease, and some species are slow to learn. It took a few centuries, but eventually another faction decided to test us. They were smarter this time. They didn't send a fleet. They didn't attack an outpost. They sent spies. They infiltrated human colonies, moving quietly through our cities, gathering intelligence. They studied our military movements, our technologies, our people. For years, they hid among us, learning, waiting, and then they made their move. A Terran research facility on the outskirts of the solar system went dark. No distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, just silence. When Earth's response teams arrived, they found only one thing: a single scientist left alive. She was tied to a chair in the center of the ruined facility. The rest of her team was gone. No bodies, no evidence, just gone. Carved into the walls around her was a message written in human blood. "We are not afraid of you." Humanity didn't respond immediately. We let them think they had won, let them believe they had struck a nerve. We waited. And then, without warning, every intelligence network across the galaxy collapsed overnight. Government records were erased. Security systems were breached. Communications between entire factions failed simultaneously. No one knew how. No one knew when it had started. And then the real terror began. The infiltrators, the ones who had studied us, who had walked among us, began to disappear. One by one, they vanished. Some were found later, left in public places, their bodies broken beyond recognition. Others were never found at all. The faction responsible panicked. They tried to secure their borders, mobilize their forces, but it was already too late. Entire command structures collapsed as leaders were found dead in their own bunkers. Their ships drifted empty, their crews missing. Their colonies reported strange movements in the night, figures seen in the shadows, whispers in the darkness. The final blow came when their High Chancellor woke to find himself in his own war room, surrounded by his dead guards. He was alive for the moment. A human was sitting across from him, cleaning a blade with deliberate slowness. No name, no rank, no insignia, just a voice that spoke in calm, measured words. "We are not afraid of you either." The next morning, the faction officially surrendered. No terms, no negotiations. They simply gave up, disbanded their government, abandoned their weapons, and scattered across the galaxy, vowing never to cross Earth again. There was no official record of what happened to their leaders, but the message was clear. Humanity did not forgive. Humanity did not forget. And above all else, humanity did not tolerate slow learners. And so the galaxy remained in check, not because of laws, not because of treaties, but because of fear. Not fear of war. Fear of what would happen if humanity ever truly lost its patience. Generations passed, and the stories became myths. The younger races whispered about Earth in secret, telling each other tales of the monsters in human skin, the warriors who fought like ghosts, the punishments that came swift and silent. Some doubted the truth until they met the survivors, the broken remnants of the factions who had dared to test us. They never recovered. Their people still existed, but they had no future. They wandered the galaxy as refugees, cursed by their own ancestors' mistakes. And they all had the same warning: do not provoke them, do not challenge them, do not give them a reason. For centuries, the galaxy obeyed, until one day a new empire arose. They were young, reckless, bold, arrogant in the way all rising powers are. They expanded quickly, claiming worlds, forging alliances, pushing into uncharted space, and eventually, inevitably, they found humanity. At first, they respected us. They approached carefully, seeking trade, studying our history with wary curiosity. But as their influence grew, so did their ambition. They saw Earth's silence as complacency. They mistook our lack of expansion for stagnation. And just as before, they whispered among themselves, how dangerous can they really be? The cycle was beginning again. They started small, testing our borders, probing our defenses. They sent ambassadors laced with subtle threats, hints of demands. Earth gave them nothing. And then they made their mistake. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't an invasion. It was a simple statement, spoken by their leader in a moment of arrogance, broadcast across the stars. Humanity is no longer the power it once was. It is time they accepted their place. The silence that followed was suffocating. The galaxy held its breath. The old survivors of past mistakes paled in horror, whispering desperate prayers that Earth would let this one slide. But deep down, they already knew. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And now, once again, humanity had been given a reason. Somewhere, in a place no one dared speak of, doors that had long remained sealed were opening. The monsters were being awakened, and the galaxy would soon remember the oldest lesson of all. Never provoke Earth.